Board Spotlight, Muskegon River Watershed. Right here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Scott Faulkner. I'm the Executive Director of the Muskegon River Watershed Assembly. And a few months back, we had our first opportunity to reach out. And since that time, there's been some great success with the potential development of the property owned by Grant Public Schools. It's an 80-acre parcel. For those of you that are familiar with it, it's bordered by Walnut, 108 from the north, 112 to the south, and the Brower family owns property to the east. Has Wheeler Creek / Wheeler Drain that runs through it. You guys have received some preliminary draft designs, and so tonight this is an opportunity for the board to ask me questions about those designs, about the easement, but I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on where it stands right now. I had a Teams call at 2 p.m. today with consumers, so I have some kind of, late-breaking stuff. These projects tend to be measured like glaciers. They just take an awful long time. Permitting process alone sometimes takes years. We hope we're going to reduce that down by a lot. I thought I'd cover some highlights, bring you up to speed, and any concerns or questions that you may have, I get to go back and speak to consumers directly about that on your behalf. We do have an MOU, my organization does with Grant Public Schools, and to highlight that, our job is to do the best possible job we can in developing this resource consistent with what is in the best interest of your kids. So it's your property. It's our job to be sure that if we're going to do a project there, that it's done to best practices models, so that it can become a true living laboratory for the kids to learn how to do watershed restoration. And given all the news from consumers and the hydro plants, there's going to be a lot of watershed restoration in the years ahead, and probably a really good growth opportunity for your STEM or STEAM kids as they get out of school. Why does it matter? Why does this property matter to two groups? Us as a watershed assembly, and really for Grant Public Schools. It matters to the watershed. It's an unusual property in that Wheeler Creek used to drain into the Grand River basin. It actually headed to Rockford and was naturally occurring, went to the Rogue River. Weird. Why did they change that? They did it to drain Rice Lake to create agricultural opportunities in the Grand area. It drains to Hess Lake now, which is another interesting problem all by itself. It wasn't designed to do that, so it's causing weird things to happen. It's important to us to be able to take any component of this watershed and drain every last ounce of cold water we can. If we're really looking at what we want to do with watersheds as we restore them, we want to cool down the water because it's better for fish habitat, especially trout. So that's what we're in it for. It functions primarily as a drain. It was straightened out, did a lot of that back 100 years ago, 125 years ago, straightened out. It doesn't meander like a natural stream does, and that's what causes the bank destabilization and erosion. We want to fix that. You might also be fully aware that Grant Public Schools, through its excellent grant administrator, was able to obtain a recent grant through the Fremont Foundation to build a STEM pavilion on the property. So the idea is, let's do something really great for the kids, for the science community, for the science curriculum, and for the greater county. We can turn this into a real laboratory. Here's a broken stream, let's fix it. This is how we did it. And it's part of your science curriculum. So we really think it's an important component of the kids' education. Now, why are we dragging consumers' energy into this? Well, they have money. And my job is to find the money to do the best possible projects that we can on our watershed. Why would they be willing to pay for this? It goes back to the Hardy Spillway project. So Hardy Dam, everybody knows about that. The project that's going on there is estimated to be $350 million to redo the spillway, while they're simultaneously putting out an RFP to sell it. Interesting. I don't have any idea why those two things can exist in the same world, but they do. So what we're trying to do is mitigate a problem up there. So much like when you're building a extension on an airport through a wetland, you have to offset that with the creation of wetlands somewhere else. Right? You're going to ruin something, you got to replace it. Up at Hardy Spillway, they're destroying a trout stream and a whole bunch of trees along with it. And so they have to mitigate using what's called the MI-SWAT tool, believe it or not, stream quantification tool. It basically says if you're going to destroy a stream, you get a certain number of points. You got to go build something that has the same number of points to offset it. Kind of makes sense. And so the Wheeler Creek, Wheeler Drain property offers the same kind of mitigation that consumers needs. They're motivated to do this project because they can't build the Hardy Spillway until they've identified and are approved to do an offset. So you have a lot of leverage and authority because they need your property. Or one like, we brought your property to them and said, consider this, because we thought it would be really cool to develop this as an asset for the school system. So that's just a little bit of background. They are a little short on the number of 1,100 points, and they're almost at 1,000 right now. One of the other items I wanted to bring to everybody's attention is that once a design is agreed to by you, and we say, yeah, we're in, good design, you have to sign conservation easement. Why? Because Eagle says, okay, if you're gonna come in, and we're gonna approve this through a permit, you can't go there the next day and put in an airport or anything else. You're giving up your rights to that property for a very long time, but you really can't mess with it. Part of that too is that we have to identify where, for example, the STEM pavilion would be for your students to come. Where's the parking lot gonna be, because it has to be identified in the permit. So we have to get further down the pipe with how we're gonna develop the property in other areas. It sounds like a lot of detail, because it is. So the easement is required by Eagle. So we've had the chance, we know that the board has had the opportunity to look at the draft that was put together by ECT, which is a really great environmental consulting technology firm out of Ann Arbor, and also WPS Golder, who works for Consumers Energy. I think it's what, 19 pages, something like that. It's long, it's fairly technical. It's a draft concept, and by that, you shouldn't feel ashamed if you look at it and go, what the heck does this thing mean? Right? Because it doesn't, unless you're in the field, it's a little bit hard to understand it. I do not have a science background either, so I had my scientist decode it for it. Basically, the draft to us looks like it's an attempt to take the creek and re-meander it on the property, meaning it's kind of straight in certain places. All right, let's put it back like the creek is supposed to behave. That's a sensible thing to do. The price of doing that is fairly steep based on what we know now, in that in order to re-meander a creek, it takes a lot of heavy equipment to get back in there to do the work, and you have to have clearance to use the heavy equipment, which means the trees are coming out, okay? Not delighted about that particular thing at the present moment. So this is a draft document. In my conversation with them today, they showed some level of flexibility, but understanding that you have all the cards in this particular situation. You're able to say, look, there's some things that we're looking for here that we don't see. It's not urgent that this matter is settled tonight or anytime soon. We have to be sure that it's done correctly. So when the kids come there, they say, man, this place was a mess. And now we can look forward to 20, 30, 40 years of being able to learn more about this and see how we can actually restore our watershed. So I know you have a lot of things on your plate tonight. It's really great that you put me first. Thank you for that. I wasn't sure whether all these people showed up to hear my presentation on it. Pretty sure it wasn't. But I'd like to entertain any questions or comments that you might have for me at this time.
Well, first of all, Scott, thank you for coming in and presenting and talking more about the project. I have a few questions that I have written down, but the first one that I don't have written down that comes to mind is what sort of timeline are we looking at to, with the conversation with Consumers Energy?
Sure. They're in a hurry because their permit is held up. I believe this is one of the last few things that they need to get the green light to do the Hardest Spillway project. That project, like I said, is a huge, very expensive project. They're anxious to get started. And if anybody's driven across 40th Avenue recently, it looks like crap. And the project needs to happen. They're highly motivated. So they're also going to be able to process this fairly quickly, so that as we bring comments back, their selected engineering crew will quickly do revisions. I really think in the best case scenario, we bring back some modifications in 30 days, maybe another 60, maybe 90, but before year's end, it would be nice if we come to an agreement and say, okay, cool, let's build it this way. That's the timing question. Sorry it took a long time.
No, that's. Does anybody else have questions, or should I just continue with mine? Okay. So has the Muskegon County Drain Commissioner reviewed the proposed project?
Not yet. He's next in line. He's the drain commissioner. This is Wheeler Drain.
Yeah.
Dale is going to be very interested in taking a look at this too, and he's very, very keen on restoration wherever it can be done. So we're gonna get this in front of them very soon. Sometimes we wait till it's the second iteration, rather than bring them in on the initial draft. If we don't like it, we don't wanna put it on his desk yet.
So you mentioned that with the proposed project that would be removing trees, potentially trees. So what's going to happen to all of those existing trees that are along the new channel construction?
It's a great question. One of the things, it's sort of like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors, first do no harm. That's how we like to approach these projects for whatever assets are there, namely vintage trees, old trees, mature trees, stable bank components. We don't want them messed with. What we heard today is, generally speaking, they want to take it all down so that they can do the project as completely as they want and make it more of a, trust us, it's going to look great in 20 or 30 years, which may be true, but minimizing, one of the things that I know is true of Eagle and the DNR collectively, is that they look at minimizing project impact. Like if you're going to do a project, do it with the least possible impact that you can. It makes sense. We're not confident this project is at that point yet, but we think we can get there.
So that's something that can be negotiated.
That is something that can be negotiated. You can say, you love the project, but man, these things are bugging us. You don't like the fact all the trees are coming out.
So basically, it's kind of deviated away from what you originally thought it was going to be like.
I think that's safe to say, yeah. The things that MRWA looks for is, we don't, I wouldn't say we don't care about just hitting a number of points value that somebody needs for an offset project. It's like, if we're gonna restore a watershed component, well then restore the component, put it back the way it's supposed to work. And one of our primary objectives early on, the easy targets are road crossings. Almost anything that's sick, if you will, of a creek anywhere in our county, is because they used culverts that were too small and they were elevated. So fish come up to the culvert and go, no. And so they can't migrate. And one of the first things we wanted to do is to take that crossing, which when we all walk together out there on Walnut. Yeah, it's an 18-inch jump for a fish to get up there, and in high water events, it's a rocket ship coming out the other side. So we want to see that road crossing done and done correctly. And it's done wonderful things in places like Bigelow Creek, up north of Broken Heart Drive. So that is a deviation from what we were hoping for originally.
So basically, they, on this new design, they really do not want the cool stream to be continuous, even underneath the road system, because they don't want to fool with the culverts, right?
Yes.
Of which, that is a necessity, to have that cool stream flow continuous through there for the migration and everything, yes.
Yeah, I mean, reconnecting stream links pays enormous benefit, not just for fish, but for microorganisms and so on. And we've already done field work with your students on what's there now, with the hope that after pictures can be an improvement in stream habitat. So we also believe things like road crossings are a negotiating point.
So how can we, what do you want from us? Do we need to make a motion to come back to you and say we want this to go back to more of the original design for the continuous cool spring and less destruction to the vegetation on the site and so forth?
I'm going to take any message you give me back to consumers in the hopes of giving you guys the best project you can possibly have for your kids.
So if I'm understanding this right, so you talked about, big equipment coming in and just getting it all done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trees are coming down.
Mm-hmm.
As I look at one of the pages here, in the cross section, we've got a 124 foot within the project limits, 109 foot within the project limits, and 120 foot. Is that the width that those trees will come out?
Is mostly correct. There's probably going to be some other areas like staging and so on that has to be done, so that's just warming it up. That's just,
Okay, so 100 foot or better of basically take everything out along that,
yes,
along the route.
yes.
Well, and one thing, I don't think you were with us when we walked before, but there are some trees out there that are diseased. And so I don't know if it's worth trying to figure out if some of those that we're gonna need to have removed anyways. We walked out there with a forester a while ago. I don't remember if any of you were with me. Rob may have been, I know Neil Gears was at the time. But we talked about having a forester come in, and he did. He looked, and there's starting to be some disease on some of those trees, so that's something that we'd like to remove those as well. So I don't know if that could be a staging, I don't know.
I think so, and maybe a motion there's, I guess, two ways to look at it. One is, if you can see what this looks like, if you said, okay, do this, what would this look like afterwards, right? If you see 0 trees on it, that would be a cause for concern. So I think rather than kind of wasting that time, if you say, you know, if the board makes a motion, for example, that you'd like this looked at more broadly from an overall environmental restoration perspective than simply, you know, re-meandering the stream on your property, it's sort of like come back with another revision. And we would take that under advisement. We'd advise Consumers Energy to do that, and they could work with their engineers to come up with something that can work.
So which way do you feel is the best interest for student learning? The way it was originally designed or this new design?
I'm partial because we use our own scientists, but our entire organization revolves around best practices restoration techniques.
Okay.
And my guess is, my opinion is that an environmental restoration nonprofit is probably in a better position to recommend best practices choices than a public utility.
Okay.
We want to do this the right way for the kids.
Yeah, I would request that we walk back out there sometime soon
Okay.
and kind of actually physically on site, look at what this impact would be, because it's kind of hard to visualize right now what that would look like. We're talking 80 acres, right?
Yes.
80 acres.
It's a fraction of the 80 acres that you'd be
Okay,
walking
I think
through.
it may actually be.
Let's not do that in January, but let's do it in the next month or so.
Yeah.
And I think just so that we can be transparent with consumers as well, I think what we're asking for and you're asking for is a reasonable thing. So what I would like to do is a walkthrough and include a representative from Consumers Energy, so that when we're walking out there and saying, you're gonna cut all these trees down, what's up with that? You know, not okay. Or let's look at the culvert and say, is there something we can do here? I think that a walkthrough with the parties present always makes sense. It's easier to do that than to, you know, send a messenger. So if you like that idea, we can organize that. And I'm sure consumers is urgent. They want this to happen so they can move their third of $1 billion project forward. And they have good people that work there. We just got to get them out into the field so they can see what we're talking about too.
Yeah, and I guess I was curious about what is the plan for the surrounding properties upstream and downstream, you know, from this project?
Yes.
What will happen with them?
I've talked to everybody that's adjacent on all roads, or at least left notes and badgered them basically to say hello. And my first, I guess, idea is if it's not going to directly affect their project, if there's not any heavy equipment coming in their product, I just want to make them aware of what we're doing. And then as the project moves forward and we have a better level of specificity or granularity in what's happening, then we'll do a public forum with them and sit down and say, okay, this is what's coming. Maybe we're going to put in that new culvert. Maybe we're going to put in a bridge crossing on Walnut. Here's the impact it could have because your property is on the other end of that culvert. I want to make sure you're happy with that. So we've been very open and transparent with these stakeholders. I want to continue down that path too.
What is the expected impact on Hess Lake?
We don't know. We know that we're gonna have better oxygenated water, we know we're gonna have better species heading their direction. It cannot hurt. What happens to them once they hit Hess Lake?
I wonder.
We'll let the Hess Lake Association talk about that one.
Yeah, I wonder if it impacts the water level in Hess Lake.
Not at all,
Okay.
not at all.
Okay.
And you already mentioned that, you know, if this plan, what it will do is help with fish migration, which I think is really a big part of that whole restoration
It is.
project. Can you talk a little bit more about you said the restrictive conservation easement?
Only that it's required, which is never a fun word, but once we decide that the project looks like X, then it gets codified, because that's what the permit's based on. So it goes to Eagle and says, you're gonna build this. If you build this and we permit it and you have the money coming from here, you're not gonna go back and decide you're gonna put in a runway or a bowling alley on any of this property in perpetuity. So even if you sell the property, it's gotta be, the easement goes on forever.
And just for everybody here, that was one of the big parts of our initial language, is that we wanted that, that property to be used for educational purposes. So
Yes.
if we do at some point you know, for whatever reason decide to look into selling, the people who buy it need to use it.
Yeah, if it's a restrictive covenant, they have to agree to the same terms and conditions that purchase of the property.
That's great. Well, I mean, it's never easy.
No.
But I still think that what we're talking about is really good. It's utilizing, a very valuable piece of property for, an on-site learning lab. And I know that we have initiatives that are already in place and moving, so part of me just wants to get going. But I also don't want to rush into anything that is not gonna be the best situation for our students, for that property. So I don't know about making a formal, like, filing motion right now. Is that something that we could hold off on until we have a walkthrough?
I think a
I feel like
walkthrough
that
is-
might be, we might be better informed.
Yes. I'd have to do the walkthrough and then come back with another update either in 30 or 60 days when we have something to report.
Can you send us some possible, like, can you connect with consumers and then
Yes.
send us some possible dates?
Absolutely. We have to do that.
Would a letter from us to you, would you be able to use that as leverage to get them to kind of revert back to the original design? If we put some things in there that would cause them to redesign it?
I don't think that would hurt to do that and just an expression of the direction that you think the board
Okay.
would like this to see. And I think most of it, we have to trust our common sense too.
Sure.
Right? I mean, preserving what's there, you know, starting and trying to preserve what's there that's good always makes sense in a project like this. And so we want to approach it that way. And whereas when you have a giant checkbook and you're in a hurry, you just tend to do things to be expeditious. I don't think that that's necessarily in the best interest of the school system.
Okay, I'm gonna throw 3 points at you. You tell me if they're good or bad. You know, like this or whatever.
Okay.
So that we can include it in the letter.
Okay.
You know, so more or less the verbiage and direction to help you get it to where it needs to
Okay.
go. First of all, least environmental impact. Secondly, best conservation program for learning and ecosystem presentation. Thirdly, ensure a continuous flow of the cold stream drainage, including the culverts.
Yes.
Okay. Can we do that, Ken? So we get it one out?
Yeah. I guess I would include that, you know, I don't think we necessarily want it to look good in 30 years. I mean, I'd like it to look good sooner than that, but,
Okay.
so.
Thanks, Scott.
Yes. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good job.